This Headless Professor video is about how you define your population and what impact that is going to have on the kinds of hypotheses you can actually test. We're actually going to combine some of the points made in previous Headless Professor videos. For example, the distinction between constants and variables. A constant is something that can be measured, but does not change from person to person. A variable is some phenomenon whose variation can be measured empirically. In psychology, the scientific study of behavior, those measurable phenomena constituting relevant variables might include such things as stimuli, responses, or background organismic factors. For example, we could ask each person in our survey, "Do you live in Yucaipa?" Some people would say yes. Other people in our survey might live in some surrounding city like San Bernardino or Redlands, and those people would say no. So the response given by our subjects would vary on this question. It's a variable. Science is all about empirically testing hypotheses about variables. Hypothesis is a prediction which guides our research. Hypotheses are generated by scientific theories, but they must be tested by empirical data in order for these hypotheses to be scientific in their nature. Each variable must be handled in one of these ways: measuring the variable, manipulating the variable, that's what we do in an experiment, controlling the variable, in other words, making it a constant, or assuming that some kind of randomization is taking place. The next objective I want to tie in here is the distinction between these key terms: subject, group, sample, and population. A subject is one particular person or animal observed in our research, like the patient in a case study or someone filling out a questionnaire in a survey. The population is the entire class of subjects studied, all the people in the world. The sample would be those few subjects that we actually get around to observing, such as those persons who actually fill out the questionnaires in our survey. The sample is obviously going to be smaller than the population. The sample constitutes those subjects actually observed. A good sample should be large and representative of the population. Now, a group is a smaller portion of that sample, sharing a specific characteristic. In surveys, the grouping is simply measured. In experiments, grouping is actually assigned. Now, let's look at this particular diagram. The biggest circle is population. A smaller circle within the larger one is the sample, those people actually observed. And then we can divide the sample into different groups that we actually compare. An individual subject, John, would be a member of one particular group within the sample. He's also a member of the sample, and he's also a member of the larger population. When we begin by defining a population, that actually means that we are setting up a constant. For example, if we define our population as all people living in Yucaipa, living in Yucaipa is no longer a variable, because everybody in our population lives in Yucaipa. Once you have changed a variable into a constant, you cannot test hypotheses about it. You need variables to test hypotheses. Now the solution is to redefine the population as a smaller unit, as a group, or as a sample. Going back to the situation in Yucaipa, if we said, okay, we have a group of people in our sample from Yucaipa, and we have another group from a surrounding city, Redlands, and we can compare the two groups, Redlands versus Yucaipa. Now we can test a hypothesis about the variable of living in Yucaipa. Indeed, we might have a hypothesis about people living in China. And as long as we survey only people in China, we might have a problem testing that hypothesis. Now, if the population was to include all the people in the world, yes, we could compare the people in China to people in the rest of the world. And if we wanted to compare all human beings to some other species, our population would have to be something like primates, and we'd actually have to survey primates of different species in order to compare with human beings. So, this Headless Professor video has demonstrated that how you define your population impacts what hypotheses you can test.